Hello, welcome to Culture Vultures. I'm Sandy Frye, your host. Our creative director is Nancy Cole, and this is a program that examines the arts all around Tampa Bay. And today we have Jack Wilkins, who is professor and director of jazz studies at the University of South Florida, and who recently took his very talented students to Europe. And there they performed at a number of festivals. Welcome, Jack.
Thanks, great to be here.
The tradition of going to Europe has almost been solidified at this point. How many performances do they get to work with professionals?
Well, this is maybe our 8th or 9th trip we've taken with the USF Jazz Ensembles. Chuck Owen actually took the group before I even got here to perform at an International Society for Music Education World Conference in Scandinavia, and then toured around and played performances at festivals and venues. That was 1991. In 1998, we also were selected. It's by invitation, so you submit to be selected at the International Society for Music Education World Conference, which was in Pretoria, South Africa that year.
Oh, really?
And that was a real exciting trip. So that anchored another tour where we played jazz clubs and actually visited a couple of the universities because they were still in session. In the summertime, most of the universities aren't in session in Europe. But so we were able to go to University of Cape Town and in Natal, Durban, and visit some of the universities and perform and play with their students and faculty. And then since then we've taken groups to the European jazz festivals all across Europe, some of the biggest festivals in the world: North Sea Jazz Festival, Montreux Jazz Festival. Jazz à Vienne is a large festival in France outside of Lyon. We've played the Antibes Jazz Festival in the French Riviera, basically, and then
Right.
A number of festivals in
hardship.
Italy. Well, yeah, the students enjoyed that one.
Right.
And then Italy, we've played a few of the festivals. Probably my favorite is the Umbria Jazz Festival, which is known as maybe the world's best, what they call
Is that
over
right?
there, pure jazz festival. So it really features the kinds of artists and jazz, the jazz greats that we really study and listen to. So the students got to hear, and actually their performances at the Umbria Jazz Festival usually happen about 7 o'clock at night before the big concert at 8:30. And so most of the time when we would play, we would go to the large concert, and the stages we would play would be where all the audience that's waiting to go to the large outdoor concert venue to hear Sonny Rollins or Pat Metheny or any of the big artists there. So we'd have huge crowds, and they would be very jazz savvy.
So you were the warm-up.
Yeah, exactly. And those kind of opportunities are why we go on these tours, and it's all by invitation. You have to have a really good jazz group, and you send recordings in. They have to be selected. But we've been enough times that the jazz festivals know about USF Jazz and know we bring a really great product, and so they're usually happy to work with us and end up putting us in some good concert slots at these festivals, and so it's a great experience.
Who are the schools that compete for this?
Well, a lot of schools from all around the country as well as the world send in to perform, and even sometimes non-school oriented groups, sometimes gospel choirs or things like that. It depends on the kind of festival it is. Most of the festivals we go to are jazz festivals exclusively, so it's mostly jazz bands. But a lot of the larger jazz programs around the country will submit recordings to be selected, and because it's such a great experience for students, and this is sort of a pre-professional performance experience that you really can't duplicate, in a classroom or in a building. The whole part of being a musician about getting on the bus and making sure you have your instrument and your music, and driving 3 hours and getting off the bus and carrying it all toward the stage and having a sound check that's cut short, and so you're not really ready, and then all of a sudden you got to be playing, and there's the downbeat, and somebody may not feel great that day or need to go to the bathroom, and it all doesn't matter, right? You're going to play as soon as the word go
Right.
hits the stage,
Go.
they're on, and you've got to play, at your best and keep all the things that you were supposed to remember from rehearsals and performance last night in your head, and then make great music.
Right.
And you can't duplicate that except for in a live tour experience, and you certainly can't duplicate the types of audiences and people that you get at these jazz festivals, because they're really knowledgeable of jazz music, and
That's right.
they appreciate really good performances, and so the students get both sides. They get to play for an audience that understands the music, but they play so well that they are appreciated, and they get applause, and they applaud for the solos, a good solo, or they know what's going on with the music. So the applause comes at the appropriate time, and then when people will come up afterwards, it'll be very informed, compliments or conversations, and they'll say, well, you played this West Montgomery song, I own that record, and actually you played some of the original West Montgomery solo, didn't you? And things like that. So that's insight that you don't get except for an educated audience, and it's so fun to be in a situation where that happens.
Does it happen in America a lot?
Sure. It just depends on where you play, but less so than it would happen at some of the jazz festivals. But generally, an American audience is not maybe as appreciative or informed, or I think part of it is just the experience of going to art music concerts, and the tradition, the European tradition, has been there for so many more hundreds of years that
That's right.
this is like going to a classical concert was 50 years ago or 100 years ago, and there's an understanding of how to actually sit in an audience at a music concert and be quiet, and and we just don't get to, our audiences have as much experience getting to do that. We find that out with students and everything. Everybody thinks it's more like watching television when you go, or and so you can kind of talk and you can play with your phone and whatever. So
well, when you were growing up, did you have music in mind as a profession?
Yeah, I was fortunate, looking back, that my high school band director in Greensboro, North Carolina, had put together a really great music program, and this was right in the era before some of the changes took place in the 70s with busing and changing of schools. But he had the whole system worked out so that his elementary schools that fed the junior high schools, that fed the senior high schools, were all lined up, and all the teachers that started in the elementary school at 8 in the morning ended up in the middle school, the junior high school at 11, and then ended up at the high school at 1 for our rehearsals. And so I had a saxophone teacher, and we had 6 or 7 faculty in the band program at a high school, which is unheard of.
Yeah.
And we had a saxophone quartet, and we had all these things that I thought was normal, but I realized,
Right.
it was kind of like being in a small college
That's right.
music program. So I was blessed to be kind of part of that experience, but it also allowed me to advance my musicianship and interest, and so I was kind of had the jazz fever by the time I was headed off to college, and I
Right, and you
went.
had your brothers too.
Well, yeah, my older brothers, we were talking about when I chose the saxophone in 5th grade. I'm not sure I chose it. I think my brothers said that, you got to play the saxophone because it's on all these Motown records and these James Brown records that we're listening to. So that pretty much dates everything, I think, when I was around. But I'm really glad I did because, I think the saxophone's one of the great instruments, and certainly one of the American sounds that, I've always gravitated to.
Right.
So, and I was able to go to one of the premier jazz schools at the time, was University of Miami. And so if I was from the Southeast, I'm from Greensboro, North Carolina, you didn't have too many choices of music schools that had jazz programs at that time, and now so many music schools do. So for a lot of us in North Carolina, it was go to University of North Texas, or go to Miami, or go north to Berkeley or New York or something. So I ended up going to Miami. It was a great experience.
I bet it was. Before you became a teacher and a professor, Did you work as a musician?
Well, especially because I went to University of Miami, there was a lot of chances to perform in Miami, and this was I shouldn't date myself, but I will. This was mid '70s to early '80s, and so there wasn't a South Beach at that point.
No.
I mean, there was, but it wasn't anything going on.
Right.
But all the Miami Beach hotels were open, and almost all of them had entertainments and shows. And so I was playing 5, 6, 7 nights a week.
Wow.
As a 21-year-old musician, and thinking I've made it, you know.
Yes,
and
yes.
this is what I want to do. And so I worked. I actually stopped my undergrad for a little while and just worked full time in Miami for a couple of years, and then realized it was kind of similar and wasn't necessarily going to change, and it wasn't exactly what I wanted to do. So I ended up going back to school and finishing a master's and all that kind of stuff. But
That was smart. That really was smart.
I think the real world experience of
Is
playing
very
professionally, though, was really important, and that's not as available to these young students these days. And so the schools become sort of the apprenticeship places for students to learn to perform, and so we try and have as many performance opportunities as possible on campus during the school year, as well as these kind of tours and things like that. So,
Right. Well, during that time in Miami, by the way, because you must have had a lot of people coming in from Cuba. That would be just about the time.
Well, it was.
Did it get
it was
Spanish
right before
influence?
Mariel boat lift.
Yeah.
That was the end of, I think that was 80 or
Yeah.
79, and I left town about 79 to finish school back in North Carolina, and then went to Indiana to do my grad work. But sure, and I played with lots of Cuban bands and musicians, and met lots of Cuban musicians and families, and it was always interesting because it's a different viewpoint of a lot of things,
I know.
like Bay of Pigs and most of the
All that
families,
followed.
the guys I played with were my age. It was their parents that came over after the Castro Revolution.
Right.
And so you got all kinds of interesting stories that weren't the same story, I learned in social studies class.
That's very true. Well, luckily, you were able to supply us with two very, very talented students who were part of Jazz Tet
Right.
that went to Europe this summer. They indicated that they had a great time. And thank you for setting
Thank you
them
very
up.
much.
Change your life. Learn TV and internet video production skills at TBCN in Tampa. Become a skilled video producer quickly and inexpensively. Learn audio, editing, lighting, and camera basics. Produce multi-camera videos for TV, the internet, business, or pleasure.
Welcome to my live call-in show on Tampa Bay Community Network. You too can learn to produce and star in your own video programming, or you can have TBCN staff do it for you.
Call TBCN at 813-977-5200 today and change your life. Visit our website at tbcn.org and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn.
And now we have the pleasure of the company of two musicians from USF, Allison Ajami, baritone saxophonist, and Teague Bechtel, guitarist. You did 10 days in Europe, and how many performances would you say?
It was between 7 and 8. I think we did 7 or 8, yeah.
And how many countries?
Just the one, just England.
England.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Well, at least the English was being spoken pretty much.
Practice our second language.
Does England sort of, is it like the New Orleans of Europe? I mean, do people start to gravitate in summer toward their festivals?
Yeah, there was a lot of kind of draw to the old classic jazz style, the kind of New Orleans style, more so over there than you would see here.
And when the participating groups, are all of them or very few come from college ensembles?
It seemed that it was fewer were from college ensembles.
I would think so.
In talking to a lot of the performers, a lot of them were from London. that seemed to be like a major music hub for England.
And what countries were had other representation?
I know one of the bigger festivals we did in Birmingham, there were a few from, I think, maybe, I want to say Bulgaria or something. It showed, Spain, the artist, and where they were from.
Right.
Most of them were from the area, but there was, one from Spain, one from kind of some lesser known
Anything from
areas.
Italy or France?
A few from Italy.
I would have thought France would be there, just because they think they should be everywhere, actually. But tell me what the experience was like. What do you ever have ensemble groups and playing in ensemble? You were two of how many USF students?
10?
Yeah, it was pretty big.
It was pretty big. So you could spell each other at times? Yes? No?
Well, each of us had like specific parts. So you were kind of spelled by the music, like what tunes you were playing on.
Yeah.
Kind of determined like who was on for that show.
You and the leader had your choice of compositions to play, right? I mean, there wasn't anything that they said, we'd like you to do this from this era or whatever.
We
Right,
had our
right.
set list. And
Yeah, so it was your choice, which probably gave it a kind of a modern tilt, if you will. Describe for us how long the sessions would go, and do they start in the morning and close fairly early, or do they start, how does that go?
Our sets were always even in the evening, except for two of them in the big festival, the Birmingham Festival. And we usually get 2 45 or 50-minute sets with a short break in between and play. The clubs, the performances are always at night, and the two festivals we did, there would be some artists playing in the day all the way through the night. Never really in the morning.
No, I'm sure. How did you get into the baritone sax? I think it's a marvelous instrument, and you probably are the belle of the ball wherever you go. There aren't that many women jazz musicians.
Well, I wish I had a more exciting story for you, but I just started playing alto sax when I was in middle school, because my friends wanted to be in the band, and I thought that I would join too, and started playing that. Got into high school, and the jazz ensemble there was missing a baritone sax chair, and I said, I'll do it. And then I didn't pick up the alto after that. And I just
Did you go to Florida school?
Yes.
Was it an art school?
No, actually, it was just a public high school in
Regular?
Lutz, yeah.
Well, it speaks so well of that school that they continue to have music ensembles. When budgets are tight, the arts usually are the ones that take the fall, as it were. Now, how about you? You did play something else, didn't you?
Yeah, I started out on the trombone. That was my first instrument, and I quickly turned to guitar just because I really wanted to play rock tunes, and that was kind of hard on the guitar.
You'd always be in demand.
Yeah, right.
And you didn't have to learn music.
Right.
Tell me the joke about guitar.
Yeah, that's just the standard joke is guitar players can't read music, so we catch a lot of flack for that.
It's
standard.
an interesting beginning.
It is, yeah.
Then everybody should be playing the guitar almost. For that
It's a difficult instrument to read on, and you usually pick it up by ear, so it's not.
Are you also from Florida?
I'm actually from Virginia, and I grew up in Virginia and North Carolina, and then did my undergrad at UCF.
Here. And what drew you to it? Does USF jazz have a reputation among musicians?
Yeah,
young
it's
musicians?
right. It's. I came over here on the recommendation of some of the faculty at UCF that I know, and they knew faculty here at USF, and like the guitar professor here, LaRue Nicholson. I've always been a big fan of his playing, and was really looking forward to studying with him. So that was kind of the big draw for me.
Does the University of Central Florida also have a jazz sequence?
They do.
Has that become just an integral part of the music curriculum now in schools, or does it tend to be on the East Coast and the West Coast possibly? I know there's a good jazz school in Texas.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. There's. I'd say a lot of schools do have jazz programs, but I wouldn't say it's become common. But I think there's a lot of them, and it's. I definitely think that, for what I've noticed, that jazz is something that you can study, whether it's your major or not, or whether a school has a program. I think everybody has like jazz classes that you can take. And
Right. You had said that the European musicians tended toward the established hits, really, Stan Kenton and so forth. Is that because they really don't have sort of an urge to do modern music, and is it in fact are there any Charlie Mingus's there? Some things like that, or do they just fall back on what has been done?
Well, I think there's a lot of modern playing out there, but it's just a matter of the transition.
Right.
Jazz is born in America and making its way over
Right.
to the other countries, and it was, I think, a matter of the festivals we were playing at, kind of small towns and the things that they gravitated towards. But there are a lot of modern players out there, I would think.
There are,
Yeah.
and composers.
Yeah.
Yeah, in Europe. Well, that's good to know, because it certainly, does it bring a different kind of a feeling into the music?
I mean, I think so. The one thing I noticed was they really seemed to produce a lot of excellent brass players.
No kidding.
It just seemed like there was a never-ending supply of them. But we did see, we saw a couple of small groups play a little bit, and they were, I mean, it was traditional American jazz. I mean, if you heard it just walking in off the street, I mean, you wouldn't think it was.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
It could be that there had been, I think, in a lot of German towns and so forth, on Sunday, the brass would come into the town square and give a little concert.
Right.
And that probably produced a lot of brass players, as it were. Well, what is your future schedule, and what do you think you'll do? Will you be a performer / teacher, or what?
That's a really, really heavy question. Yeah, I do want to keep playing, and I would like to teach. I think you really can't be one without the other. So I am looking for, further study, playing, and eventually becoming a teacher at the university level.
Oh, good.
That's really the same thing for me. Like
Right.
I'm trying to find a program where I can pursue a doctorate now, so I can continue to teach and play.
Yeah, and you have had a lot of performance experience, haven't you?
I've
Describe it for us.
well, I had a blues band for a couple years that toured in the Southeast, and then I've been playing jazz now for 6 years.
Wow.
So.
And do musicians have agents, by the way?
Some?
Yeah.
They do.
But
it just occurred to me that I know that actors do, and probably directors do, and certainly writers do. But I've never. Music is a kind of such an art unto itself that everyone is, I think, doesn't work against other people or hope that they get the part or whatever.
Right.
But it's a kind of a much more collegial.
yeah.
Do you feel that way?
Yeah, most of the time.
What do the young musicians that you met in Europe, what are they doing? Are they making their living through performance, or are they also teachers, or how's that go?
I can't say I really know. I mean, we talked to a few of them, and a lot of them were telling me really the only place that you can make it as a musician was London.
Right.
But
well,
yeah.
Big
but-
cities are, sure.
Right. But there seemed to be a lot of people there that were strictly performers.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Well, I think you've got a great future ahead of you.
Thank you.
And it sounds like Europe was a fun and kind of not only entertaining, but I bet you learned a lot about musicians' lives there too.
It was pretty excellent, yes.
That's
Life-changing.
great. That's great. And of the faculty, Was Jack Wilkins with you there, and anybody else from the faculty?
Tom Brantley runs it.
Oh, great.
Excellent.
And let me tell anybody out there, if you want to hear really good music, not only jazz, that's marvelous, but other kinds, traditional music, and you've got a brand new, absolutely beautiful facility now, which is filling up rapidly. I see the last performance, I was there, and it was filled. And Gary Similian, your guest saxist,
Yes.
was very generous with his time. So it was great. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for being here.